This is the northern region. Inside its boundaries lies 3/4 of all Nigeria, more than half of all Nigerian people. These are Nigerians with a history. Once linked to the Mediterranean civilization by ancient trade routes, they are linked today by their Muslim faith. This is the central mosque in Kano City, heartland of northern Muslim country. We felt the deep power of the Islamic faith that dwells in these people. 5 times a day, the faithful pray. They face Mecca, put their faces to the ground, implore the blessings of Allah. We saw, too, the tradition-bound power of the native authority system, the system of so-called indirect rule, through which the British have administered this part of Nigeria. They preserved the power of the traditional rulers, the emirs, and through them controlled the territory. This is the Emir of Kano, combination king, high priest, judge, jury, legislator, and tax collector for his province. Once a year, the Emir himself, in the majesty of his robes and his Cadillac, arrives in each district to lay down the tax rates for the year. First come his red and green robed bodyguards who chase the village square, like the U.S. Secret Service in advance of a presidential visit. Then come the native authority police and the Emir's trumpeters. The Emir invokes the blessings of Allah on the people. He tells the headmen of each village summoned here that their tax will not be raised this year, even though expenditures have gone up. The fact that this is an election year may have something to do with that. The Emir's private secretary, a younger brother, calls each village head in turn. The small pieces of paper show the tax levied on each family, in each hamlet or section of the village concerned. Every person in the district is accounted for in this head tax levy. The standard tax this year is 37 shillings, just short of $6 per head. In this district of 28,000 heads, the Emir raised 46,000 pounds sterling for his native authority government. The Emir himself does not tell the people for whom to vote, but after he enters his brother's house to rest, his information officer, Matamasuli, youthful leader in the Northern People's Congress, takes over. There can be no doubt in the people's minds for whom the Emir, their political and religious ruler and symbol, wants them to vote. Not many of them here will try to beat City Hall.
We had our own system of administration before the Europeans came. We had our own educational system before the Europeans came. And so we can see that it is even very foolish for anybody, for that matter, to call the northern region a backward place. It is not a backward place, and it has never been.
Chief Awolowo, helicopter crusader from the more liberated South, disagrees.
It's a wide gap which creates mutual suspicion between the northerners and the southerners. And that gap must be closed as quickly as we can in order to remove the suspicion which exists. The present feudal system must disappear in due course, and they should be replaced by elected council over which the emirs should preside.
So what about your program? Where does it differ, for example, from the NCNC?
Well, our program differs considerably from the NCNC in the sense that we have started what we call the welfare state in the western region, which is not being started in other places. Take the question of wages, for instance. We are the only region in the country paying 5 shillings and 6 pence minimum wage to workers. Whereas in the north here, it's only 2 shillings and 8 pence.
The helicopter campaign invasion of Chief Awolowo into the hostile north was an invitation to violence. He was out to break through the solid north of the Sardauna's party and win seats for his action group among the northern Muslims. Just as a Republican candidate in the United States might campaign below the Mason-Dixon line in an effort to break the Democratic solid South. The last time Awolowo spoke here several years ago, his action group rally touched off 4 days of rioting, 30 killed, nearly 400 casualties. Feelings were running high again. Ancient tribal animosities between Yoruba and Hausa.
Do you think you're going to have any trouble up here, any violence of any kind in this area?
I don't think so. I doubt it very much. So far, I've had a very successful campaign tour of the north. don't think...
no violence or no police...
No violence
on the...
no, not as far as I'm concerned.
Just before sunset, there were only a few hundred people at the rally site. By sunset, there were 25,000. They seemed to come out of the ground.
Very interesting to note that our opponents, the MPC, are so afraid of the message of the action group that they have arranged for some hooligans to disturb this very big and successful meeting.
The native authority police were far too few, and they did nothing to remove the organized young hoodlums, stirring up passions at the edge of the crowd till it was too late. For a time, it looked ugly. Quietly dispersed, perhaps remembering the previous riot. This time, nobody killed, only a few injured. Awolowo is a man of steady nerve. He was ill when he appeared at the rally, but he had to appear. Otherwise, he would have been called a coward by his enemies. By morning, he felt better.
There was a considerable riot when you spoke here yesterday. Was this an organized thing put on by the opposition?
My view is that it had been organized by some people.
You don't think it could have been just...
It wasn't spontaneous. In a town like Kano, you have a lot of loafers who can easily be made to do any dirty work by giving them a few shillings or something.
Does this mean the campaign as a whole is going to get more violent as it goes on?
I don't think so. My experience is that you have loafers mainly in the cities. They don't exist in the villages. And so far, my campaigns in the villages have been very successful, even though there are no police protection at all. You attended one, anyway.
There was no riot when the Sardauna staged his Northern People's Congress rally in Kano a few days later. Nobody would have dared try to break up that one. But it was significant that the Sardauna came out at all. He had said he wouldn't have to campaign in this election. The threat of Iwo's helicopter tour in the north may have changed his mind. Politicians who remember the Truman Dewey election of 48 don't take victory for granted.
There is no need for me to do any election campaign here. In the old days, the Emir of Kano was known as the chief warrior of the Sultan of Sokoto. And today, I regard all the people of Kano as the warriors of the Sardauna of Sokoto.
Sardauna spoke about 10 minutes, no longer. He didn't have to speak longer. Kano was in the bag for his northern party. In this province, the Emir of Kano is spiritual leader among his people. His honor guard of drummers, horsemen, soldiers is a spectacle for impressing the citizenry whenever he leaves or returns to his palace. His powers have Oriental roots. According to local legend, the coats of mail of his honor guard came from the Crusade. But today, another kind of crusade, a political crusade from the south, is causing the Emir and his political colleagues greater concern. It was in the lavish medieval splendor of the Emir's palace, with the Emir himself a courteous but silent host, that we spoke with the Sardauna of Sokoto, the supreme political boss of the northern region.
The country was shattered in the first place by intertribal wars and so on. Now, although we don't have intertribal wars now, but still, you find some sort of frictions between especially major political parties. Now, I don't think, now, for instance, a gentleman came to the north here. He did a lot of things contrary to northern traditions and customs, and that arouses a lot of feeling. Now, for somebody to come in a plane right over the top of the Emir's house, yeah, to drop some leaflets, so that is contrary to our customs here. In the first place, the house is further. And secondly, well, we don't, why should he look into the house of another man, which are not our own traditions? Well, he did that sort of thing in many places, and that has aroused a lot of feeling against him, and also against his Yoruba tribe.
I assume, sir, you are talking now about the helicopter campaign of the Action Group.
Yes, I am, indeed.
What is your principal complaint about the Action Group?
Well, I'm not so certain. I have nothing against the Action Group, except they are more or less
people, I mean, who don't come in the open to tell you what they mean or what they feel. I would rather like live